Oh, it was devastating. These were my first 1,000 bottles, and yeah, it was incredibly disappointing. I just remember sitting there crying.
Really?
Because it had been a build-up, and it had been a tough 3 months. It was very lonely. And I was like, right, guys, we are going to watch Christmas film.
And relabel.
and relabel every single bottle.
Trials, tribulations, mistakes, barriers, successes and failures. Hear it here firsthand from those that have grown billion-dollar businesses to those that are just starting out. Winner of the Campaign Publishing Award for Best Business Podcast in the UK, Success is in the Mind is the only place where you can get a sense of business reality in a world full of idealism. Everyone claims to be an entrepreneur, but can everyone live up to the title? What does it take to start a business, to get your product into a high street store or grow a well-managed team? I'm Oliver Bruce, founder and entrepreneur myself. Join me as I interview business leaders and founders from across the globe, delving into what makes them tick, their differentiators and intrinsic motivators. This is Success is in the Mind.
Thank you so much to our headline sponsors for the year, Capsule Cover. Capsule Cover, a specialist insurance partner to growth businesses, supports some of the UK's most innovative and ambitious companies. Sponsoring each and every one of our podcasts, we're on a journey with Capsule, and so should you be. If you're a scale-up or an ambitious, high-growth business, check out how Capsule Cover can help you with bespoke insurance solutions. Inquire via capsulecover.com and quote Success22. So it's the 5th of January. We may have all overindulged this Christmas, and yes, dry January is upon us. In this episode, we've the unapologetically bold, vibrant and joyful alcohol-free brand Caleño. Founded by Ellie Webb in 2019 when she was asked to be the designated driver for a gig she was going to with some friends, Ellie quickly became bored of Coke and J2Os on offer. She wanted something a little more punchy, not alcoholic, but a little bit more grown up. Caleño was born. Named after Ellie's Colombian roots in the city of Cali, Caleño is now stocked in supermarkets nationwide. From giving a few bottles out at a festival, Caleño's first order for Sainsbury's was for some 6,000 units. I asked, how do you develop an alcohol-free brand so successfully? What lessons were learned in the early years of product development? And, Ellie, have you gone teetotal? Ladies and gentlemen, Ellie Webb.
Very happy to be here.
So, I mean, looking back, you were in the world of marketing for 8 years. You studied at university, again, a marketing degree, but you chucked it all away to go into the world of alcohol beverages. Why'd you do that?
Interestingly, so the alcohol industry was actually my second job post-uni. So I worked in shopper marketing for a little while, and I guess I was one of those lucky people at university or prior to university. I kind of knew what I wanted to do because I loved creativity. I was quite good at design and art, and at one point I wanted to be a designer, but then I also really loved the business side of things, and I did a course in business and economics at school, and I really enjoyed it, and marketing seemed to bring those two things together, the kind of creativity and the business element. So I was quite set on marketing, and I joined a shopper marketing agency. That was my first job in Bath, and I loved it. I worked with some great clients and some big FMCG brands like Nestle, Imperial Tobacco. Actually, that was interesting.
Wow, okay.
The tobacco industry.
A lot of money there.
But it felt that I was getting a little bit pigeonholed into one particular sector of marketing. So a job came up in the drinks industry in marketing that was it was a lot broader, and that really appealed to me. So that's why I got into that sector. And a lot of people say once you're in the drinks industry, you never leave. I kind of didn't, but I moved into alcohol free, and a lot of people thought I was a bit mad. Like, why? Because the industry is as you would expect, it's typically like quite boozy. Your world is surrounded by alcohol, events, socials you go to. So it was a little bit weird when I told people I was leaving to go and create an alcohol-free spirit.
It is ballsy, it is, but arguably you sort of foresaw, I suppose, the way the world's going, because alcohol-free has become quite cool. Yes, it's niche, but it's a hugely growing market, and there's big brands out there that are offering alcohol-free as a kind of, a keynote product really now.
Yeah, exactly. I think, at the time, I was very much trying to move more into the consumer world of brands. The role I was in was very B2B. So we were working quite closely with bars and restaurants, so bar owners, pub owners. The company I worked for, Matthew Clark, they are a national distributor for the UK for booze, essentially. So they're the ones that make sure you can get your bottle of Bacardi and your bottles of wine behind the bar. And they have a huge network. So it was very B2B, and I wanted to get a little bit closer to the consumer and what it was like to kind of launch a consumer brand. So one of the projects I took on just before leaving was the launch of Bud Light in the UK. So up until 3 or 4 years ago, Bud Light didn't exist in the UK. And it was a big launch coming, and the company I was in, being one of the largest distributors for alcohol, they had a big part in that, making sure that Bud Light got into restaurants and bars across the UK. So I kind of spearheaded that launch. And I remember within that, a lot of the insight was saying, people are, young people are drinking a lot less. So actually we're going to re-engineer the ABV to be lower than it is in the States. And I think that was my first exposure, and there were other bits of insight, but it was okay, interesting. Big brand like Bud Light is really looking at the trends and young people drinking, and this was back in 2016, so way before I did Dry January myself. But I think it started to seed that interest in this space.
Because in terms of actually how you came up with the idea, though, you went to a gig with your mates in Bristol, and you were bored of drinking J2Os, you were bored of drinking Coke, and you decided there has to be something better on the market. Was that the first thought process that you had in terms of, okay, actually I do want to start to change what I'm doing, I do want to get out of the alcohol industry and maybe go into that alcohol-free world?
Yeah, January is an interesting time. I think a lot of people make changes in January. It's stereotypical, like new year, new me. Everyone kind of gets that. Like, I want to change a career. I think, to be honest, I was feeling that in the run up to January, especially, we're in that period now, Christmas, kind of the festive season coming up to Dry January. It can get very boozy. And for me, it'd been 3 or 4 of years of doing that. And kind of you get to a new year and you think, you reevaluate what you want to do. So I think it was a mixture of things, but certainly going out with my friends and not drinking for a month when the options were normally a glass of water or Diet Coke definitely was not what I wanted, was not exciting, and made me think, we've really got this wrong. The drinks industry has got this so wrong. They're completely ignoring people that don't want to drink alcohol and kind of shunning them and going, all right, you can drink an orange juice or water. Like, basically, we don't care about you. And as someone who was a drinker, I still drink now. I'm not teetotal. I would class myself as a balanced drinker, a mindful drinker. As someone that appreciates drinks and the kind of from a broad spectrum, I just felt that the imbalance was huge, and we needed to do something about it. So that's kind of where I physically felt the pain of that experience. And it's what got me really thinking about the space. And I think quite often you hear entrepreneurs speak and they're like, to them it feels really obvious. And to everyone else, it's like you've just been putting up with it for a while and you don't really know why until someone actually asks the question of like, well, hang on a minute. Why is it still like this?
So, looking at the B2B world that you're in with Matthew Clark and then going into the B2C world, obviously from a marketing point of view, it's totally different, but arguably from a way that you actually transact with individuals, it's totally different. Where did you kind of learn how to transact with the consumer market?
I spent, in the run up to launching Caleño, I spent a lot of time visiting bars and restaurants across Bristol and across London. I think I went into about 200 in total, maybe, unannounced. I just would spend, right, today I'm going to go out and visit, and I would take early versions of the product. And so that was getting direct feedback from the bartenders, but what they allowed me to do, some of them were very kind enough to actually say, we'll let you come in and sample directly with our customers. So I essentially spent the night behind the bar in some venues in Bristol, and I would go out and I would take samples to their customers and ask them what they thought, because that gave me the ability to get direct feedback from people. I think it's really important before you launch a product, no matter how good you think the idea might be in the concept and how passionate about it, if you don't check that the consumer would happily part with money for that and actually wants it, you're into a world of trouble.
Yeah, because that's what you did with a drinks festival, didn't you? You did that with Sainsbury's, and they happened to come along, drink it, and they go, actually, I really like this. And they said they'd email you, and you were pretty sceptical. But the Monday after, you got an email from the buyer at Sainsbury's, and you shifted them 6,000 units over time. And that was one of your first orders, right?
Yeah, that was interesting. So this was sort of summer of 2018, where I was still, I was bottling the product in my kitchen and blending it, and I'd sort of bought all the equipment so I could do that, but I could only do that in a really small scale. So I think I'd got probably about 25 bottles together for a festival called the Mindful Drinking Festival. And I wasn't selling, obviously, because I didn't have enough, I only had enough product to sample with people, but it was really important to get feedback and speak to people at Spitalfields Market. So great location in London, amazing footfall, especially during the summer. And yeah, a guy called Tom came over to me. He worked for Future Brands, and he'd obviously been going around trying different products, and he tried Caleño, and he really liked it. And he said that, and he said, I'm going to contact you on Monday, and let's see, we work with small brands. We want to bring them into the Sainsbury's business, and we work with the buyers to try and get you listed, and we also offer you a lot of support on the marketing to help grow your brand, which was great. But I thought, this is mad. Like, I've never heard of,
too good to be true.
I mean, I'd never worked with retailers before in my career, my short career. My world was bartenders and restaurants and hotels. I didn't have any exposure to retailers really, other than my earlier shopper marketing days. So when he got in touch on Monday, no one was more surprised than me. And when we stayed in contact, it wasn't, it didn't happen straight away. But when the buyer actually got quite interested in the category, so prior to Caleño going into Sainsbury's, they just had one brand on shelf, one product, and it was actually in decline. So they decided, it was in decline. It wasn't growing.
Are they still in there? Have they disappeared, or have you taken the market from them?
I think they're still in there. I won't name the brand, but I think they might still be on shelf. I'm not sure. The point was that what we've learned is actually the consumer wants choice. They want a range of brands and products to choose from, different flavors. And so actually Sainsbury's decided they weren't the market leader in the space at the time. They didn't even have a non-alcoholic spirit range. They decided to put Caleño in and a few other brands. And they went big with Caleño. They put us into 500 stores, an unknown brand. No one knew about us, and they put us on shelf. And suddenly, that category started to skyrocket for them, and they're now the market leaders.
Wow, that's incredible! Because it was a 6,000 unit order, right? And you were making 20, 30, 40 bottles by hand, and all of a sudden, over time, you've been given this 6,000 unit order. How did you facilitate that? Did you have to fund it? Did you have to get investment? Because there's an element of upfront cost to you guys as a brand.
Yeah, I raised investment the month or so before Dry January. I think the money came in.
Perfect.
So it was pretty close. It was pretty close to the wire. Yeah. Because my January launch wasn't huge. It was basically me with a mobile bar that a friend had made for me, doing sampling outside markets. A friend of mine, Jack, who owns a Latin American supermarket, said, come on down to my place. Our warehouse is alongside the entrance to Maltby Market. Come and do some sampling. I went and did some sampling with Pineapple Dance Studios. It was literally me running around London. And so I didn't have a huge budget for launch. There was a little bit of social media advertising, and actually a really cool moment for me was when I was doing the sampling outside Maltby Market, and someone came up to me and said, I've seen this brand before. I think I've seen you on social media. And I thought, oh my God, it's working. It's really working. So that was really cool. But no, I went into January having agreed to list in 500 stores. It's one of those moments where you kind of say, I've got to say I either say yes or no. I could have said no. I could have said no. You know what? I don't have a bottler. I don't have a bottler yet.
And looking at the actual business plan, the structure, the way that you actually came up, I suppose, with the concept, did you pull on the degree or indeed, frankly, the class that you did back at school when you were doing business and economics? Did you look back at what you'd learnt then and implement elements in the real world? Or did you have to pull on advice from other people to be able to help you steer and navigate the choppy waters? Because it can't have been easy.
Yeah, I did, and I would say that my learnings from my job role at Matthew Clark, but also my marketing degree, have helped me at different stages in the business. So I would say the marketing degree that I did is more suited to a larger business. They don't teach you how to launch a brand per se. I mean, you do certain modules that you have to grow a brand, but they don't say this is how, step by step, this is how you launch products. I was quite lucky, and there were some businesses in the Bristol area that actually ran specific workshops for launching products. So I pulled on their expertise. I started to kind of build out my network at that point, meet with other entrepreneurs that were further down the line than I was, because there are just so many questions that you have as an entrepreneur starting out. Doing everything you're ultimately doing for the first time. And so you don't know the answer. You don't know what the right path to take is. So it was a biggest learning curve for me.
What would you pass on to people that you know now that you didn't know then in terms of launching a brand, I suppose, Ellie?
What I didn't know then was actually how challenging launching a brand on my own would be. Because what I quickly discovered as I started going out into the world of FMCG and starting to talk to other brands was I would be meeting other brands and they would say, this is our guy who's in charge of operations and finance. This is our guy that looks after marketing. And this founder does all the business development. And I'm sat there thinking, Christ, I'm trying to do all of those things. I'm trying to juggle it all. And I think it's just those conversations that you have, those back and forth with people around, is this the right decision? I sort of had to have that internal monologue in my head. And when you've never gone through things before, so I pulled on people around me as much as I could and family, but ultimately they don't always understand business. So I think for me, it's been important having mentors and people that you can pull on that have got that experience. If you don't have co-founders, so someone, would I go into this now with a co-founder or a couple of co-founders? Maybe, because it certainly would have lightened the load.
It spreads the risk, I suppose, doesn't it? It gives you more ability to have more skills that you may not have yourself. I mean, what weaknesses, Ellie, do you have that you've discovered since starting it that actually you'd want to plug the gap of? And maybe you've hired people to do that now, but in the early days, where were your sort of downfalls?
Yeah, I mean, I naturally lean to things that are more creative. I love that side. So designing the bottle and the branding and bringing all of that to life was my favorite thing to do. What I didn't love was the spreadsheets and the financial side. And I've had to get to know that piece really well, because as a business owner, you need to understand what's going on. You need to be able to read a P&L and understand what that's telling you. So I've enjoyed learning that. But are you going to see me kind of pouring through spreadsheets and telling you that's fun? Absolutely not. So I've brought in someone and we're bringing in people that are experts in that area and enjoy that side of the business. So I'm a big believer. I think one thing I've learned is, do what you're really good at and what gives you energy, because if you do that, you're never going to work a day in your life. So, of course, you've got to be, running a business, you've got to be well-rounded and you've got to understand different elements of the business. So I've worn different hats from the operational side. I found incredibly challenging. My sister does that now, actually. She's our operations manager. She was Caleño employee number 1.
Oh, really? That was the first employee?
Yeah.
Because your mother influences it as well, didn't she? So you've obviously got your sister in as ops manager, but looking at how the brand itself was influenced, it was obviously because your mother's Colombian, you went out to see her, the vibrancy of Cali being the city out there, was what essentially inspired the brand. So it's a really nice family story there. But when you came up with the name, did you know it was the right name from day one, or did you have multiple iterations of it?
No, I didn't land on Caleño straight away. I originally had I think I'd sort of, a temporary name was Feliz, which means
Feliz.
happy in Spanish.
That makes sense. Feliz Navidad. There you go. That's happy.
Yeah,
happy
Feliz
Christmas.
Navidad. And I wanted to give it a name that embodied the essence of what I wanted the brand to be. You know, Caleño's mission is to show people they can have fun without drinking. And I think we're really starting to do that. You know, we're putting on some amazing events. You know, when people go out to, we did one the other week with a Latin dance studio in London. We invited, around 50, 60 people down to drink alcohol-free cocktails all night. There were performers, there was dancing, there was music. Everyone loved it. And we had so many comments coming back. Like, I didn't realize I could have such a great night without alcohol. And it's people rely too much on the alcohol part, but really it's about the atmosphere, the people you're with, the ambience, the entertainment. That's what makes a good night. And so I personally feel our mission is to show that. And so when it came to the name, I wanted something that embodied that. And I've pulled heavily on my experiences of Colombia and that South American culture and their lust for life. And I wanted to kind of bring that into the alcohol-free world.
Just so looking at the vibrancy of the brand and looking at the way that you guys have created your own space in the alcohol-free world, when we were researching you, we got retargeted by an actual alcohol brand that are going into the alcohol-free world. And again, they had quite a vibrant brand in the alcohol-free world, but in the real world, with the alcohol brand they normally push, quite boring, quite dry. You know, Budweiser's red, Beck's is green. The reason that you've gone for a colourful, vibrant brand is why? Because you don't have to have alcohol to have fun. You want to have that vibrancy and that passion through just enjoying a good time out, right? Is that the reason behind the colour?
Yeah. Ultimately, I didn't want people who were not drinking for whatever reason, whether it's just for the night, for a week, for a month, for whatever, you're pregnant, religious, whatever reason, I didn't want people to think that they're making a compromise just because they're not drinking alcohol. Therefore, why shouldn't that brand be just as exciting as all the other brands on shelf? That was my fundamental driving reason. I wanted people to look at a bottle of Caleño on shelf and go, my God, that looks exciting and fun. I want to pick that bottle up. I want to have a look at it. I want to understand it. I want to know the story behind it. Because why not? Why shouldn't we be able to do that? I think there's a huge stigma around what it means to not drink. And for so long, particularly in the UK, we've got a culture of, if you're not drinking, you're boring. We've all had it when we go out and we say to our friends, oh, actually, guys, I'm not drinking alcohol tonight. And everyone's like, oh, well, you know, John's being boring tonight. And I think we need to change that. We need to change that attitude, because it's really about the choices, and it's really about a mindset shift. So that was the fundamental reason behind why the brand looks like it does.
Do you see a massive uplift when it comes to, you know, January, for instance, dry Jan? Do you see people going, right, I'm going to try and turn over this new leaf, I'm going to order a bulk of Caleño, for instance, and that is going to be the new me? Or do you see people purchasing consistently throughout the year?
I mean, absolutely. We are part of a trend that is shifting quickly. You know, people are really focused on their physical and mental well-being. The mental well-being part, incredibly so since the pandemic. That has really changed gear, and we're seeing the reasons that people are cutting back their drinking or drinking less alcohol. They are for those reasons. So there is definitely a consistent upward trend. But in January, we see huge spikes of people, because it's a time where you've very likely overindulged at Christmas. And like we were saying earlier, it's a time where you kind of reflect and think, I'm gonna pick up some new habits, New Year's resolutions. I'm gonna lose weight. I'm gonna get in shape. I'm gonna have a healthy, you start the year with the best intentions. So
they never work.
So many people that, you've got the people throughout the year that are, they might be fitness advocates, they might be interested in well-being, so they are naturally more inclined to look at an alcohol-free product because it ties into the rest of their lifestyle. And then you've got people who in January maybe aren't that into all of that stuff, but are really into it during that month. And so it's a great time for brands like us, because we're then exposed to a whole bunch of people, way more people than we normally would be. So it's a chance to kind of get people to experience the product and taste it. And then, so therefore later in the year they go, I remember I tried that amazing cocktail by Caleño. It was great. So it's a Monday night. I don't want to drink, so I'm gonna order that at the bar, or I'm gonna buy a bottle and have it during the week.
Do you think people drink it during the day as well? Like, how you kind of might go out for a couple of beers, on a Thursday afternoon with colleagues. Do you see people drinking Caleño, more consistently throughout the year, throughout the week as well? So Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, for lunch they might just have a tipple. Do you find that? Or is it very much because, it's not the culture yet, it's not taken as the norm, people tend not to do it because it's associated with fun?
We're not at the lunchtime occasion yet, but it's a big opportunity. If you think about boozy brunches, if you think about, years gone by where it used to be kind of quite normal to go out and have a boozy lunch with colleagues, like that just doesn't happen anymore, or it's not happening as much. And so I think there is a real opportunity to upgrade, your soft drink at lunchtime with a non-alcoholic cocktail or a non-alcoholic beer. What I would say about the shift is I think this category started with Monday, Tuesday, earlier in the week, I'm going to have a non-alcoholic drink. As that's becoming more normal, you're starting to see non-alcoholic drinks now filtering into some of those higher tempo times of the week, your Thursday, Friday nights and weekends. We get a lot of people drinking Caleño on Sundays because they don't want to drink. And it also is a way to just balance your drinking. If you want to have a great night, but you don't want to overdo it and you want to wake up on Saturday making the most of your day, you can have a couple of alcoholic drinks and then some non-alcoholic ones.
In terms of when you, just looking back at your first orders, when you had your 6,000 bottles ordered, you then had a couple that came through the first manufacturing, I suppose, cohort. The labels were all wrong. You had to work it out yourself over the weekend, literally relabeling thousands of bottles with your sister. What went through your mind then?
Oh, it was devastating. These were my first 1,000 bottles, and yeah, it was incredibly disappointing. I just remember sitting there crying.
Really?
Because it had been a build-up, and it had been a tough 3 months. It was very lonely. It was very cold. I was in my office, I'd made a makeshift office in my house, and it was freezing. I couldn't get it to be warm. And it was just, there were just issue after, first of all, it was really difficult to get hold of the bottler in the first place, wouldn't answer my calls. And so I didn't know if I would actually have any bottles to launch with in January. So when they eventually got made, I thought, brilliant, I can send these out. They're finally going into the warehouse. And then I get this call to say, we thought you should know, we've looked at the bottles and there's a bit of a problem with the labels there. I think where they bottled them in quite kind of cold conditions, you're talking December time, freezing, and there'd been some condensation under, on the glass. At the time it seemed okay, and then when they went into boxes, there's just this bubbling appeared around the label. And there's all, you get all of these sorts of issues in the beginning. When you first start out, I learned you quickly discover all things go wrong, and then you find a way to figure them out. But at the time, this was my first real setback, and I was like, oh God. So I got them to deliver the 2 pallets to my parents in Kent, where I was staying with my 2 sisters. And I was like, right, guys, we are going to watch Christmas film
and relabel
and relabel every single bottle.
In terms of sourcing a manufacturer, Ellie, it must be quite difficult to actually get somebody to take you seriously if they're focused on working with big hundreds, 300,000 unit orders, but arguably quite expensive as well, because they're going to charge you a premium just simply because the economies of scale surely aren't there.
Oh God, yeah, we were paying a lot in the first year, because what I quickly realised is we sit in between 2 categories. You've got soft drinks that can be manufactured at scale, but they typically come in small bottles, 200ml bottles with a cap. And so the industry exists to automate those at scale. And then you've got the alcohol industry who can bottle 50 or 70 cl bottles for you at speed, but they don't have the processes and they're not set up to bottle non-alcoholic liquids. And we sat somewhere in the middle. So we quickly found we were going to bottlers and manufacturers, and they were like, yeah, we can't do this for you because we don't have the right equipment. So we've had to work with them to invest in the right machinery. They've invested in the right machinery. So that takes time. That doesn't happen overnight. That happens over a few years. And gradually, costs can come down. But in the beginning, yeah, it was hugely expensive.
And how did you kind of bankroll that then? Because obviously you got that initial round of investment. Was that what sort of saw you through for the early, 6-12 months? Because you haven't been going for that long. 3 years you've been actually in business for. Are you still using that initial investment, or have you had to fund further?
No, we funded further. That initial investment, got us through year one primarily, and then the kind of next round of investment was to get employees in the business. You quickly find you can only do so much with 2 or 3 or 4 people in the business, and we didn't even have that. So I think I brought in a marketing person, I brought in salespeople. Like, we need to grow beyond Sainsbury's, and we're starting to get into bars and restaurants. So the next round of funding was to fund marketing, production, but also bring more people into the business and start to grow the team.
So what was the initial fund then in year one? How much did you raise?
I believe we raised just over 200,000.
So that's pretty incredible to be able to raise just 200,000 quid with essentially you and your sister. What was the second fund then that you had to raise for staff?
Second fund was upwards of around 700.
Okay, fine.
Because at that point we were doing pretty well in Sainsbury's. We were, we're flying through 3 bottles in 500 stores across the UK. So that was, we needed to fund the production for that, and also get into other on-trade operators. I think at that time we'd then gone into Revolution to Cuba and some national operators. I mean, this was just before we were just starting to gain some traction. And then the pandemic hit in, the rest, March 2020.
Well, yeah.
So that channel quickly came to a
halt, I imagine.
Quickly came to a
But
close.
you had 700,000 quid in the bank. You might have had a little bit more inclusive of sales, I suppose. Is that what was your cushion during the pandemic? Because you could still pay staff. I'm assuming you might have furloughed some of them, albeit they might not have been there long enough actually to furlough. So what happened to the business during the last, I suppose, 2 years?
Yeah, so we didn't actually furlough anyone. We worked tirelessly during the pandemic, because what we did do was we drastically, we had to batten down the hatchets and protect the cash we had, because we didn't know what would happen to the market, whether we'd still be able to get bottles out to retailers and be able to sell online. We didn't know how secure the supply chain would be, whether our bottlers would be able to manufacture. We had places closing down because of COVID outbreaks, so we didn't know any of that. So the first thing we did, I think we shaved 50% off our marketing budgets, but we didn't completely cut everything, because actually that was a time where the bigger companies, the bigger brands, particularly bigger alcohol brands, were taking all of their spend off social media. So actually it became much more cost effective to use platforms like social media to advertise. So we used the time to, as a brand that was fairly unknown at the time, we'd only been going a year or so, we used that opportunity to try and grow our awareness. And we also used the time to develop a new product. Somehow, through some miracle, we managed to create a second product, Dark and Spicy, and launch it in November 2020. And we went through an entire brand refresh. We worked with an agency in Mexico to refresh our packaging, our bottle, our branding. So we were pretty busy.
Yeah, you are.
We didn't let up.
In terms of working with an agency in Mexico, what was the reason for that? Was that again the vibrancy and the sort of, I suppose, the ties to a certain extent to Colombia in that sort of vibrancy aspect, or was that just simply a budgetary thing? No,
we approached a few agencies in the UK, and then I think someone mentioned to me this agency that had done some brilliant work, and I thought, so it wasn't a budgetary thing, but actually when I spoke to them and they did a little bit of work, they just got it straight away. They got it, and I was like, my God, we need to work with these guys. Like they'll be brilliant, and they did a fantastic job for us. And I really enjoyed working with them. So we tried a few different routes, but we just found they really got the kind of Latin spirit of the brand, being in Mexico. So that worked incredibly well for us.
Do you think you're going to develop more flavours down the line for, say, Christmas, 2022, frankly? Something more cinnamon orientated that's warmer, or is it always going to be quite summery, quite vibey?
Yeah, I think there's definitely a space for experimentation. Maybe bringing out some limited editions. I think, especially if we've got a direct-to-consumer platform, and that's a great way to test things out. You can launch a product as a limited edition, see if it gets traction, rather than putting all of your eggs into one basket and going, we're going to launch this product without really knowing whether people are going to like it or not. So I'm a big fan of potentially doing that.
So you've got 2 SKUs now, I suppose. Would you have started the brand with 2 SKUs, or would you have very much gone in with just one if you had your time again?
Good question. Would I have launched with 2 SKUs? I quite liked having one. It gave real focus to myself and the team at a time where, when you just launch a brand, you're still working out your messaging, what worked, you're still learning about the category, learning about the consumer. So maybe having 2 would have been a little bit confusing. I don't know. Possibly not, but I think having one just really focused the attention.
100%. And I suppose you could own that space, own that visual, and own that brand when launching it. In terms of how you raised the money, Ellie, in the early days, how did you go about actually approaching VCs or approaching individuals with private equity and asking them for the money? It's not an easy thing to do, and you've raised nearly £1 million in little under 18 months.
Yeah, I have to admit, I knew nothing about the space before launch, nothing. And so I did a lot of research. I listened to a lot of podcasts. There's so many different ways you can raise money. And I think the one piece of advice I would give people is just talk to other founders and entrepreneurs before you pick a path. There's no right or wrong answer. But you need to, I spent some time thinking about, what I want from the business, what I want to get out of it, what I want to learn, what I need from my investors. You can get smart investors. You can get investors where it's just about the cash. You can do crowdfunding where actually you're involving lots and lots of people on that journey with you. And that's right for different brands. So I think, my kind of one piece of advice and what I did was just to understand all of those elements and then figure out what was right.
And what type of investor did you go for then? Was it a smart investor, or you didn't crowdfund it, did you?
No, we didn't crowdfund it. We went for smart investment. So investors that are in this category who understand drinks market, because, and I think also part of that was, again, being a solo entrepreneur. That can be really beneficial. Having expertise, people you can lean on for advice is great.
Yeah, 100%. And actually, when this podcast airs, it'll obviously be dry January. It'll be the 5th of January specifically. But only 2 days ago, you picked up the award for for the Food and Drink Entrepreneur of the Year for the Southwest. So, you've won a lot of awards. I've often see you guys in the back of these awards brochures as I go up against you guys for Young Entrepreneur of the Year in just the general category. Now, how important to your brand as a consumer brand is winning these awards? It must be critical.
Certainly on the product side, and you've kind of mentioned one for me, which is brilliant to have that recognition. But on the product side, it's crucial to win these awards because we operate in a category where when I first started, it was me and a handful of other non-alcoholic spirits. Tiny. And now there are hundreds because this space has just exploded, and food and drink, it's such an innovative space. So many people have got involved, and awards really set you apart in terms of quality, because unfortunately I see some brands and products come into this space where they just want to make a quick buck, and so they haven't spent that time and energy and effort in developing the product to a really high standard. And that's a shame, because it will mean a consumer will have quite a negative first experience potentially with this category. So we use awards to really kind of as a marker of quality, a promise to the consumer of that this has been tried and tested by the experts who have rated it as a gold or a silver or a bronze or whatever it might be. So we're putting We won a gold for Dark and Spicy at the International Wine and Spirits Awards, and we're going to be putting that on our packaging.
See that? I mean, that's incredible. But also the fact that you're a single female founder as well in business is also hugely inspiring, because so many individuals either co-found, and that's fine, but being a female in business, incredibly difficult, especially going it alone. Have you come up against barriers, and issues, I suppose, that your male counterparts may not have come up against?
I definitely think investment is more difficult for women, and I think
why
those
do you think
barriers.
that is?
Yeah, because my experience speaking to other women in this industry, if you go to a VC or investor, typically it's predominantly male, and they like to see a male co-founder in there. And so when they look at a solo female entrepreneur who, from my experience, who had no entrepreneurial experience prior to launching a business, they see it as a risk. And
Well,
so
I kinda get that.
I really enjoy it when I see VCs that have been created to back female entrepreneurs specifically. And I think we need more of that, because the stats speak for themselves. Only 1% of investment goes to female founded businesses, and that needs to change.
That is, I didn't realise it was as low as that. That is unbelievably low. But how do you think we can change that then? Because fundamentally, I suppose the VCs will argue the fact that they're just investing in businesses that they believe in. It's quite discriminatory not to believe in, fundamentally, a female, right? Which is essentially what you're saying.
Yeah, I think there are a number of things we can do. I think, that's part of why I put myself out there quite a lot, because I know by telling my story, I can inspire other females to potentially start their own business. I know, listening to podcasts like these, as I was going on that journey prior to launching a business, really helped me believe that I could do this. By hearing people going, 2 years ago I had nothing and now, I've built this business, that's hugely inspiring. So I think if you're in a position like mine or, similar to mine, I think by getting your story out there, you can make a real difference to people. But also I think on the investment side, investors being more open to investing in female entrepreneurs as well. And, you see it in the corporate world, quite a bit as well, and giving females more leadership positions. There's a real drive at the moment around that. So I think the same needs to happen with investment.
100%. So I suppose just to look at what success looks like for you individually, but also as a brand, what does that feel and what does that look like for you?
Success for me as a brand and an individual, it's two-part. I think individually, I went on this journey to learn and to prove to myself that I could launch a brand and start something from nothing and create it into something with a clear purpose, and taking that clear purpose. If we can achieve that mission which is intertwined with my personal mission of, we want to make not drinking more fun for people. If we can do that as a brand collectively, as a team, I'll be so happy. And I think, culturally that is changing. And I think we're on a journey. Over the next couple of years, it's going to become more and more of the norm to drink and moderate, but actually not see it as a compromise. Still go out and meet with your friends. It is about the availability, and we've got a job to do to make sure that when you go into a bar or restaurant, that you see non-alcoholic options on the menu so you can make that choice. It's great to see draft beer going on tap now, alcohol-free draft beer, because that's a great experience for people. So I think for success for me is achieving our mission.
So, looking at, the market, it's growing. You guys have been around for 3 years. You've just alluded to the fact that over the next couple of years, there is significant growth there. Is there an exit on the horizon, or are you going to carry this on for the foreseeable?
Possibly an exit, I think, in mind, if the opportunity is there to take the brand to a global platform. This trend of around drinking less and opting for alcohol alternatives doesn't just exist in the UK. It exists all over the world, the US, Australia, Europe, and beyond. And, that can take time to grow at scale. So if there's an opportunity at some point to take our brand to a global scale, then absolutely, I would consider that.
Look, Ellie, you are a female founder. You are the first podcast of the year. It is Dry January. If I want to turn over a new leaf and not drink alcohol for at least the next 4 weeks, where can I go to buy a bottle?
You can go to caleñodrinks.com, or if you don't want to go online, you can go to Waitrose and Sainsbury's and Ocado to find your Caleño fix.
Perfect. I've loved every minute of this truly brilliant brand, and hopefully we can catch up soon. Thank you so much, Ellie.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for listening. Coming up next week.
There have been some days where I'll stop for a minute and I'll look back, and this whole rush of emotion will sort of take over my body of like, wow, if I look at myself 10 years ago, and if you had told me that I would have had a Forbes 30 under 30, I would have laughed at you. You know, it's those times where you stop and think, and, you know, you say to yourself, wow.
Thank you so much to our headline sponsors for the year, Capsule Cover. Capsule Cover, a specialist insurance partner to growth businesses, supports some of the UK's most innovative and ambitious companies. Sponsoring each and every one of our podcasts, we're on a journey with Capsule, and so should you be. If you're a scale-up or an ambitious, high-growth business, check out how Capsule Cover can help you with bespoke insurance solutions. Inquire via capsulecover.com and quote Success22.
See you next week, 8 a.m. on all podcast platforms. Simply subscribe or ask your smart speaker to play Success is in the Mind podcast. This is a Pinpoint Media podcast presented by me, Oliver Bruce, produced by Dan Miller and Fergus Bruce, edited and designed by Harry Fox and Victoria Bramwell, filmed by Madeline Harris, marketed by Ellie Hanwell and Rachel Buchanan Hughes, and managed by Bethan Wyatt and Annabelle Lawton-Smith. Quite a team. Thanks, guys. If you know anyone you think we should interview, if you want to tell your story or have your say, please reach out to me directly via podcast@pinpoint-media.co.uk. Remember, there's never a good time to start a business, but in business, you should always have a good time. Cheers, guys.